But it's really all about the competition. I mean, even today, if we could do something to compete against one another, I still like to do that.
Yeah. At 68, Larry Bird sits far from the noise of the modern NBA. He does not argue his legacy. He does not revisit old debates. Everything that needed to be proven was already settled decades ago. What remains is sharper than pride: memory. Bird has always been a man of few words. Silence was never weakness in his world. It was a filter. He listened carefully. He observed everything. And when someone crossed a line, when someone treated him as less than what he was, he never forgot it. Forgiveness was not part of his competitive vocabulary. The NBA he entered in the late 70s and dominated through the 80s was ruthless. It was physical. It was political. It was built on hierarchy, reputation, and unspoken rules about who belonged at the top. Larry Bird did not fit the visual mold. He was not explosive. He was not intimidating. He did not look like the face of a league built on power and athletic dominance. That contradiction invited doubt, and doubt quickly turned into disrespect. For Bird, disrespect was never limited to trash talk. It was deeper than words exchanged on the floor. It was the assumption that his intelligence mattered less than speed, that his instincts could be neutralized, that his presence was temporary. Every raised eyebrow, every dismissive comment, every strategic slight fed the same conclusion in his mind: they do not see me yet. And that was always the danger. Larry Bird never reacted immediately. He waited, he adjusted, he remembered. When the moment arrived, he responded with control, precision, and finality. To understand why certain names still linger in his story, why certain moments still carry weight, we first need to understand who Larry Bird truly was before the conflict ever began. Larry Bird was shaped long before the NBA learned his name. Raised in Indiana, he grew up in an environment where pride was quiet and toughness was assumed. He learned early to rely on himself to endure without complaint and to measure people by actions rather than words. That mindset never changed when the spotlight arrived. When Bird entered professional basketball, he brought no interest in fitting expectations. He played the game as a problem to be solved. Angles, timing, anticipation. He understood spacing before it became fashionable. He read defenses before they realized they were exposed. His body did not overwhelm opponents, his mind did. And that made him dangerous in ways many did not recognize until it was too late. Bird's competitiveness was not emotional or impulsive, it was deliberate. He took note of every comment, every decision, every moment where he was treated as secondary, not out of insecurity but out of clarity. He believed respect was earned through dominance, not requested through words. In Boston, that belief hardened. The Celtics' culture demanded accountability, toughness, and results. Bird embodied it. He did not chase approval, he chased control. And whenever someone questioned his legitimacy, he answered with precision. Understanding Larry Bird means understanding this foundation, because the conflicts that followed were never accidental. They were inevitable. Number 5. Bill Laimbeer. Bill Laimbeer never hid what he was. He played to irritate, to disrupt, to push opponents out of rhythm and out of comfort. With the Detroit Pistons of the early and mid-1980s, that approach was not an accident. It was policy. And when Larry Bird stepped onto the floor against Detroit, Laimbeer made sure every possession carried a message. To Laimbeer, Bird represented something that challenged his entire worldview of basketball. A forward who was not physically dominant, not explosive, not intimidating by size or speed, yet still controlled games with intelligence and timing. That did not sit well in Detroit. So the Pistons tested him constantly. Elbows on rebounds, body checks off the ball. Hard fouls disguised as physical defense. The message was simple: you do not belong here without paying a price. What made Laimbeer's approach disrespectful in Bird's eyes was not the physicality itself. Bird accepted contact. He expected it. What crossed the line was the assumption that intimidation would make him fold. That if the game turned ugly enough, Bird would lose his composure or retreat from the moment. Laimbeer played as if Bird was just another skill player who needed to be reminded where the line was drawn. Bird never responded the way Laimbeer expected. There were no dramatic confrontations, no public complaints, no emotional outbursts. Instead, Bird adjusted. He positioned himself earlier. He anticipated contact before it came. He punished overcommitment with passes that broke Detroit's defensive structure. And when shots mattered most, he took them directly in front of the same defenders who tried to wear him down. The rivalry intensified as the Celtics and Pistons collided deeper into the playoffs. Each game felt personal. Each possession carried tension. Laimbeer continued to test Bird's patience, sometimes verbally, sometimes physically. Bird continued to answer the only way he believed respect was earned: by outplaying him, by outthinking him, by making sure Detroit paid for every gamble they took against him. There were moments when the battles turned openly hostile, screens set with intent, rebounds fought as if they were statements. Laimbeer leaned into the role of antagonist. Bird leaned into the role of executioner. The more Detroit tried to frame him as fragile, the more Bird exposed their reliance on chaos to compensate for precision. After the games, Bird did not praise Laimbeer. He did not romanticize the rivalry. He viewed it clearly. Laimbeer represented a brand of disrespect rooted in dismissal, a belief that Bird's game could be neutralized through force alone. That belief never held up when it mattered. In Bird's memory, Laimbeer earned his place on this list not because he was the greatest opponent, but because he embodied a type of challenge Bird despised, the kind that tried to reduce skill to toughness, intelligence to endurance. Bird did not just survive those battles. He made them irrelevant on the scoreboard. That is why Bill Laimbeer stands at number 5. Not as the most dangerous rival Larry Bird faced, but as the first reminder that underestimating him came with consequences. Number 4. Dominique Wilkins. Dominique Wilkins represented everything the NBA celebrated in the 1980s. Power, explosion, vertical dominance. He played above the rim in a way that captured attention instantly. Crowds reacted to him before the ball even touched the floor. And for a league hungry for highlights, Wilkins looked like the future. To Larry Bird, that contrast mattered. When Bird and Wilkins crossed paths in the Eastern Conference, the conversation around them was never balanced. Wilkins was framed as the superior athlete, the unstoppable scorer, the physical force Bird supposedly could not match. Game after game, the narrative leaned the same way. If Atlanta had a chance, it was because Wilkins could overwhelm Boston with speed and elevation. Bird was often described as the clever counter, efficient, smart, but limited. That framing carried an edge of disrespect. Bird never dismissed athleticism. He respected it, but he rejected the idea that highlight ability outweighed control of the game. And when Wilkins was elevated by media and opponents as the more dominant force, Bird took it personally, not because Wilkins lacked talent, but because the comparison reduced basketball to spectacle, something Bird believed was shallow. The tension peaked in the postseason where reputations were tested under pressure. The most famous confrontation came in the 1988 Eastern Conference semifinals. Boston versus Atlanta. 7 games. No hiding, no shortcuts, every possession mattered. And the series became a direct confrontation between two opposing philosophies of greatness. Wilkins scored in bursts, powerful drives, pull-up jumpers, athletic finishes that energized the building. Bird responded differently. He controlled tempo, he dictated spacing, he punished defensive mistakes before they were fully formed. While Wilkins attacked, Bird dissected. What made the matchup uncomfortable for Bird was not Wilkins' scoring. It was the persistent assumption that dominance only looked one way. That Bird's lack of vertical explosion somehow made his impact secondary. That he needed to be compared physically to justify his place. So Bird answered with precision. Game 7 became the defining moment. Wilkins scored relentlessly, over 40 points, one of the greatest individual playoff performances of the decade. And Bird never flinched. He matched him possession for possession. Shot for shot, decision for decision. While Wilkins attacked the rim, Bird attacked the structure of the game itself. Boston won. And in that victory, Bird made something clear. Athletic brilliance without control could be matched and beaten. Bird never spoke publicly about Wilkins with bitterness, but the memory lingered. Wilkins symbolized a kind of disrespect rooted in misunderstanding, a belief that intelligence needed to be justified against spectacle, that fundamentals needed permission to stand beside athletic dominance. In Bird's world, that idea was unacceptable. Dominique Wilkins earns the number 4 position not because he was an enemy, but because he represented a constant challenge to how Bird's greatness was perceived. Every time Wilkins soared, Bird was expected to explain himself. And every time Bird won, he reminded everyone that basketball was not judged by how high you jumped, but by how completely you controlled the outcome. Number 3. Isiah Thomas. Isiah Thomas understood power differently than most players of his era. He did not rely on size, he did not rely on intimidation alone, he relied on control of tempo, control of narrative, control of how opponents felt when the game slipped away from them. And when the Detroit Pistons rose into contention, that control was aimed directly at Larry Bird. From the beginning, Thomas treated Bird as a symbol, not just of the Boston Celtics, but of the league's hierarchy, the face of a franchise that received respect by default, the standard bearer for winning basketball. And for Thomas, who had built his career fighting upward, that status deserved to be challenged. The disrespect did not come in obvious ways. It was calculated, subtle, strategic. Detroit framed Boston as privileged, protected, favored. Thomas spoke with confidence about changing the balance of power in the East. He positioned his team as the ones willing to do what others would not. Play harder, push limits, break rhythm. The implication was clear. Bird's success existed within comfort. Detroit intended to remove that comfort entirely. For Bird, that implication crossed a line. The Pistons under Thomas did not just want to beat Boston, they wanted to expose them. To strip away the idea that intelligence and execution could survive sustained pressure. And Bird felt the tone immediately. The games were physical, conversations were sharp, the margin for respect narrowed with every possession. What separated Thomas from others on this list was his leadership role. This was not a single opponent acting out. This was an identity shaped from the top down. Detroit did not disguise their intent. They wanted to make Bird uncomfortable. They wanted to force him into decisions he did not want to make. They wanted to challenge his authority on the floor. Bird responded by refusing to lose control. He did not match Thomas's pace emotionally. He slowed the game. He trusted spacing. He trusted reads. When Detroit tried to rush him, he made them chase shadows. When they crowded him, he found cutters before the defense even realized it had overcommitted. Every attempt to overwhelm Bird became an opening somewhere else. As the rivalry escalated, the tone hardened. Playoff series turned into endurance tests. Each possession felt earned. Thomas continued to push the idea that Bird's era was ending, that Boston's dominance could be dismantled by aggression and unity. And Bird continued to answer without speeches, without gestures, without permission. There was no mutual admiration here. There was recognition. Thomas respected Bird's intelligence. Bird recognized Thomas's leadership. But respect was never freely exchanged. It was contested, earned inch by inch. In Bird's memory, Isiah Thomas represents a deeper form of disrespect. Not personal insults, not cheap shots, but a philosophical challenge. A claim that Bird's way of winning had an expiration date. That control could be overrun by pressure. That calm could be forced into chaos. Bird never accepted that premise. Isiah Thomas earns the number 3 position because he led the first sustained effort to take control away from Larry Bird, not just physically, but ideologically. And while Detroit would eventually rise, Bird made sure they understood one thing first. You could challenge his throne, but you would never take it quietly. Number 2. Michael Jordan. When Michael Jordan entered the league, he did not arrive quietly. He arrived with confidence that bordered on confrontation. From his earliest seasons, Jordan spoke and played as if the future already belonged to him. And in that future, Larry Bird was not a mentor. He was an obstacle. What separated Jordan from the others on this list was timing. By the mid-1980s, Bird was already established as the standard. Multiple championships, multiple MVPs, the face of winning basketball. Jordan did not challenge that status indirectly. He challenged it openly, with words, with body language, with a refusal to defer. To Bird, that mattered. Jordan played with a visible belief that the hierarchy was temporary, that the league's best player was standing in front of him, not behind him. And while many young stars entered the NBA eager to learn from Bird, Jordan entered determined to surpass him. That confidence came across as dismissal, not of Bird's past accomplishments, but of his continued authority. The disrespect was subtle but unmistakable. Jordan hunted matchups. He demanded the ball in moments designed to announce his arrival. He played as if Bird's presence was a test to be passed, not a legacy to be acknowledged. And when the Chicago Bulls faced Boston in the playoffs, that attitude sharpened. The most famous moment came in the 1986 playoffs. Jordan delivered one of the greatest scoring performances in postseason history, over 60 points against a Boston team built to dominate. After the game, Bird acknowledged Jordan's brilliance, but what lingered was the shift. Jordan had not asked for validation. He had taken the stage and treated it as his own. For Bird, that was disrespectful in a very specific way. It was not trash talk. It was assumption. The assumption that greatness was transferable by force, that Bird's era could be bypassed rather than confronted. Jordan played as if the crown was already slipping, and Bird felt the implication clearly. Bird responded the only way he knew how, by winning the series, by controlling the games Jordan could not yet control, by reminding everyone that individual brilliance meant little without command of the outcome. Jordan scored, Bird decided. As the years passed, the balance of power shifted. Jordan grew. The Bulls matured. Bird's body began to fail him. But the memory of those early confrontations remained. Jordan had challenged Bird's authority before it was customary to do so. He had played without reverence, without hesitation. In Bird's mind, Michael Jordan represents a form of disrespect rooted in inevitability. A player who looked at him and saw not a legend, but a gate to be broken through. That kind of challenge could not be ignored. Jordan earns the number 2 position because he was the first to play as if Larry Bird's dominance was already history, even while Bird was still defining the present. Number 1. Magic Johnson. Magic Johnson was never subtle. From the moment he entered the league, everything about him announced confidence. The smile, the flair, the belief that basketball was not only a contest but a stage. And when Magic stood across from Larry Bird, the contrast could not have been sharper. To the public, their rivalry became mythology. College, NBA Finals, Celtics versus Lakers, East versus West, white versus black. The league embraced the narrative because it sold hope, drama, and identity. But inside that story lived something far less romantic. For Bird, Magic's presence carried a specific kind of disrespect, not through insults or cheap shots, but through assumption. Magic played as if joy and dominance were inseparable, as if winning should look effortless, as if the game belonged to those who entertained while they conquered. That philosophy clashed directly with Bird's view of basketball as work, calculation, control. Magic did not hide his confidence. He celebrated moments loudly. He smiled through pressure. He commanded attention in ways Bird never sought. And when the Lakers faced the Celtics on the biggest stages, Magic treated those moments as proof that his way of playing was superior. That visibility mattered, because it shaped how greatness was measured. Bird felt it. The finals matchups in the 1980s were not just about championships, they were about identity. Magic led a team that thrived on pace and spectacle. Bird led a team built on execution and discipline. And every time Magic celebrated a fast break or flashed a grin after a key play, the implication lingered. This is what winning looks like now. Bird never accepted that premise. He viewed Magic's approach as dismissive of the work beneath the surface, the quiet reads. The angles no one noticed, the moments that decided games without applause, and while Bird respected Magic's talent, he rejected the idea that style outweighed substance. That popularity defined dominance. The tension reached its peak on the final stage where neither man could avoid the other's shadow. Magic played with freedom, Bird played with resolve. Magic embraced the spotlight, Bird endured it. And every victory felt like validation not just of a team but of a worldview. What made Magic the most significant source of disrespect in Bird's story was permanence. This was not a temporary challenge, this was the league's defining rivalry. A constant comparison, a reminder that Bird's greatness would always be measured against someone who played the game differently, spoke differently, and was celebrated differently. Bird answered by winning championships, by taking control of series that demanded mental toughness, by matching Magic's brilliance with efficiency and finality. When Boston won, Bird made it clear that joy was optional, precision was not. Even in defeat, Bird never conceded the argument. Magic could smile, Magic could dazzle, but Bird would decide games when the margin vanished. Magic Johnson earns the #1 position not because he disrespected Larry Bird intentionally, but because his presence challenged everything Bird believed about how basketball should be played, understood, and remembered. He was the mirror Bird could never ignore. The rival who defined an era by standing on the opposite end of the court. And in Bird's world, no challenge was greater than the one that never went away. Larry Bird's story is often told through banners, trophies, and numbers that no longer need defending. But beneath all of that lived something quieter and far more personal. A lifelong refusal to be dismissed. The 5 names on this list were not villains. They were not enemies in the simple sense. They represented moments, attitudes, assumptions. Each one in a different way questioned Bird's legitimacy, his authority, or his philosophy of the game. And each time that happened, Bird responded the same way. Not with noise, not with emotion, but with control. Disrespect did not break Larry Bird. It clarified him. It sharpened his focus and stripped the game down to what he believed truly mattered. Decision-making, timing, accountability, winning when there was nowhere left to hide. In an era defined by physical force and rising spectacle, Bird proved that intelligence could still dominate. That preparation could still overpower chaos. That silence could still speak louder than confidence. Today, basketball celebrates many forms of greatness. Athleticism, flair, personality. Bird never rejected those things. He simply refused to depend on them. His legacy stands as a reminder that respect is not given by appearances or popularity. It is taken through command of the moment. And that is why decades later, the memory of disrespect still matters to Larry Bird. Because it was never about ego. It was about proving that his way of winning belonged at the very top. The question now is simple. In today's NBA, who still plays with that same edge,